Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, we get you ready for Steelers Raiders this weekend. I want to talk about how they can finally get the offense to start fast and how that could chart a new direction for this Steelers season. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Place your first $5 bet on FanDuel, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, everyone. We have been talking all week about several different topics. We did Crossover Thursday yesterday with a shout out to Q. Always great to do that with him. I want to talk about a specific part of the offense that I think could lead to other success that's less schematic, but more about the timing and the management of how this group has worked. Now, as everyone knows, the Steelers are like one of the worst first quarter offenses in the NFL, if not the worst first half offense in the NFL. They've been very slow starting. They can't get off to us, right? And that's nothing new. They've been doing that for a while now. I think back to to past times where the Steelers have needed to wake out of a funk, and not even just in the recent iteration, just going back in my time. I've watched the Steelers since I was a kid, and just in general in football. And I think that there are ways that this offense can jumpstart things earlier. Now, I'm not saying they're going to drop, 30 on the Raiders this weekend, but I do think there is a way that Arthur Smith can call plays, not just in the structure of the plays, but also that involve certain personnel that can get things going for this offense faster and help them jump out ahead of things. But it's going to take a combination of those schematics that are going to put players in situations where they're getting the favorable matchups, but also also involving the right personnel in those situations. Now, if you watched or listened to my film breakdowns of what the Steelers did against the Cowboys last Sunday, the Steelers did open it up. They had deeper passing options. They had some shots here and there, but ultimately they didn't connect on enough big plays to win that game. But they did try. But I think that some of those things that they tried, like the deep ball to Connor Hayward when he was coming out of the fullback position on a screen pass, things like that. That was a very creative way to get Connor Hayward open. And if he catches that ball, or if the ball's thrown a little bit, if he can get under the ball just a little bit better, so that he doesn't have to jump for it, maybe that's a touchdown. Maybe that changes the entire tone of the game. And we're not speaking out this we're not speaking out that game in the way that we have been. But I think the Steelers still need to come out aggressive. But in doing so, they need to come out aggressive, and they need to attack the Raiders right into their secondary, and it needs to involve George Pickens early. Partially because this is not a rewarding George Pickens type of thing. We have to acknowledge a few things with this George Pickens situation. One, last year when the Steelers kind of called out George Pickens and after the Colts game, and that whole situation was resolved, the very next game was the Bengals game, right? And that Bengals game started off with a bang. Within the first 5 minutes of play, you had a touchdown to George Pickens that broke everything open, and they were able to get him involved. And when you get George Pickens involved, then all of a sudden he's not moping and things like that. Again, this isn't to reward him, but this is just the reality that the Steelers are in. I remember even listening to our Bengals guys on the Locked On Podcast Network, and they said that was one of the keys they had for the game was that, hey, George Pickens is obviously frustrated with his lack of production. Make sure he's not involved early, and that will disrupt him and make him less of a factor as the game continues. That didn't happen, and the Steelers were able to get it going. I think Arthur Smith, above all else, needs to draw up plays where George Pickens is involved early in big playmaking situations. Either finding places where in breaking routes or just any routes in general that you think, hey, these are matchups, these are parts of their defense that we think we can attack. let's see how we can work George into those situations, get him the ball fast, and then let things build from there. And if George Pickens is still running back, lazy routes, and if he's still not fully committing to everything, that's a problem that you'll deal with then. But the rest of your team right now knows is kind of getting the drill. You're not seeing the diva-like mentality from Pat Freiermuth. In fact, it's like quite the opposite. Same thing with Najee Harris. Those two guys have been soldiers, even while not getting their best chances at times to make plays. I think there's a real chance that if the Steelers come out in this game, they come out with the same sort of aggressive tone. Again, the Steelers threw on first down just as much as they ran on first down in the first half last week against the Cowboys. That's a fine pace. And I think that if they go at that again, that's a good idea. But part of it is also they need to get their playmakers the ball in the right spots. And I think that George Pickens is a guy who they might need to prioritize early in the game so that he can feel involved and not have to worry about it. Now, if you want to talk about trading George Pickens and you can't win with guys like George Pickens because, it's obvious that he's having issues with his lack of involvement in the offense or lack of production, that's a whole other story. But right now, you need to win football games, and this guy's on your roster, and he's a playmaker. And that's why I think that part of what Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith and whoever else, Tom Arth, everybody on offense that's involved with planning the game and getting things onto a certain script, I think what your number one mission right now, as far as, other than just scoring points, but I think one of those primary objectives needs to be getting George Pickens involved early so that he's locked in, he's part of the game, and that and also, getting the ball in the hands of your best receiving playmaker, and that's what he still is. That, and again, this isn't just go routes. This isn't just deep posts, that go for touchdowns. This is getting him involved in the slant. It's going to be look at what he did to the Bengals last year in the game, because that was the game after the Colts game when he was taking a lot of heat and taking a lot of criticism. And right now, he's taking a lot of heat and criticism because of his demeanor in this Cowboys game. I really think. The main thing here, get Pickens involved early, and then everything else can start to fall into place. Because if you do, he makes a couple big plays, you extend drives. And again, don't do so at the expense of your team. I'm not saying come out here and just throw it into double coverage, even if it's George Pickens. But I think there'll be reasonable spots where the Raiders, they're looking at the tape just like everybody else. The tape from the Cowboys and the Colts says, hey, run blitz the Steelers. Don't let Najee Harris get going. Crowd the line of scrimmage, and if Justin Fields is dropping back, guess what? Still blitz him, get after him, make it so that he only has a certain amount of time to make a quick decision, and he'll have to get the ball out fast, and maybe you could catch him in a mistake or at least force him to throw it away. That strategy has worked for 2 straight weeks. The Steelers have to be ready to counter it. Now, again, I felt like the overall scheme or the overall structure of the plays last week against the Cowboys did open the Steelers up to do that. There were passes to Connor Hayward. There were passes to Van Jefferson. There was some passes to George Pickens. But ultimately, I think they need to get that guy involved, because if they do, and he's all of a sudden clicking with the offense, it becomes much less of a problem that you have to worry about on your end. And it also forces the defense to have to honor it, because they're like, we can't let George Pickens beat us, because that's an obvious death sentence if you're letting that guy just eat and just make big plays. So then once that happens, then they have to pay attention to George Pickens. Then you can go to someone else in the passing game, Pat Freiermuth, Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, anyone. Or by that time, if they're paying attention to your number one receiver like that, guess what? Then maybe the run game starts to open up. I think there's a lot of things that can get going in there, and I'm not going to say specific plays or anything like that, but I think a major objective has to be, from Arthur Smith to Mike Tomlin to Tom Arth to everyone else, including Justin Fields, and who we're presuming to start this game, needs to be to get the ball to Pickens early in solid situations where he can make plays with his legs and show that he is involved in this offense. You do that, I think that you can get off to a hot start, but there's still other things the Steelers need to do against the Raiders. We'll break that down next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We still got a lot to discuss on this Friday episode as we get you ready for the weekend. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of a 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms and conditions apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You got to get on it right now. All you have to do is just play the numbers. You're not playing against thousands of other people, sharks and all these other things. You're not versus anybody. You're versus the numbers themselves. All you have to do is find 2 to 6 players, see their stat projections, and just guess more or less on those. And then if you're right, you start to stack your winnings, and that's how you win big on Prize Picks. That's the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform that offers injury insurance. If your lineup suffers an injury in the first half of their game to one specific player, that player doesn't have to count against your Prize Picks lineup if they don't return in the second half. That's why Prize Picks is awesome. It keeps your lineups live even when you have to suffer an injury or two. Now, on Prize Picks, you can also win up to 100 times your money with as little as making 4 correct picks, and it's across all the leagues: NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, and so much more. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. Use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly. And when you play just $5, that's code LOCKEDONNFL to play $50 for just playing $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here. So we're going to get back to Steelers Raiders, and I'll give you some more keys that I think are important to the game outside of just getting started fast and getting the ball specifically to George Pickens in this game. But we got to do, of course, our picks across the league. Also, we want to apologize. We weren't able to get Jenna Harner on this. I think this one's my fault because I needed to record this episode. I'm actually recording this episode Wednesday evening because I needed to get some things done Thursday. So I was not able to do things. So if there's an updated injury report and there's new things there, that is why I'm not talking about them in this episode. But still wanted to give you guys your look. I recorded this after my crossover Thursday episode with Q. So I still was putting in a lot of work on trying to prep for this game and make sure that I had everything going. But we thank you for everyone who tunes into the Locked On Steelers podcast. We also thank everyone who's been playing in the Pick'em League that you can find on ESPN.com that we've been doing. It's a free league. You can join at any point in time and join and pick with me and Jenna Harner every single week as we just pick every single game in the NFL. And I've been doing all right. I'm hanging in there, 46-31, not a bad record. I think I'm ranked 56th out of 356 people in our group right now. But right now we still have one first place person who right now is doing pretty well for themselves right now. That's Mr. Ryan 229. I believe they were in first place last week. They're at 52. I'm only 6 games behind them. I can catch up some ground this week. Well, we'll see where I can catch up some ground when I make my picks right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll do y'all a fun one here. I'm going to pick the Thursday night football game. I never pick the Thursday night football game because I always do this Thursday night during the game. But I'll just say, hey, I'm going to say the Seahawks won this game, even though the Niners are 3.5-point favorites. Seahawks at home. I think the Niners have been playing some bad football. I think that the Seahawks, laid a real egg last week against the Giants. I think they're going to try to bounce back and have a good one. Give me Geno Smith at home for the upset there. By the way, all the odds, ends, and lines that I'm going to give you on these picks here as we go through them and you make your picks throughout the week, it's all from FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Again, the Seahawks are 3.5-point home dogs, but I'm taking them there and them taking them to win. Let's go to a matchup of young quarterbacks, the 9:30 a.m. matchup this Sunday. The Jaguars at the Bears. The Bears are 1.5-point favorites in neutral territory. This is an international game. But I'm taking Chicago. I don't care about any points or anything like that. I think that the Bears are just a better team. I think Caleb Williams is doing better in his rookie year than what Trevor Lawrence is doing right now. I know the Jaguars are fighting a little bit harder, but I think the Bears, they'll be the better team in this matchup. They get the W. Now, this next game is going to be a really big one that Steelers fans are going to have a close eye on, because the Steelers game is at 4 o'clock. But you look at them 1 o'clock games, there's quite a few games that I think you'll be watching a little bit closer, and that's because they got some AFC North contests going on. The first AFC North contest I want to look at here are the Commanders at the Ravens. Now, the Commanders have come out blazing hot. They're 4-1. They're running the NFC East, but the Ravens are coming off that really big win against the Bengals. They're at home. The Ravens are 6.5-point favorites according to FanDuel. I'm going to take the Ravens to win because I think that they're a better team. I also think that the Jaden Daniels, he's played really well, but I think that, he's going to have his bounce. There's going to be a bounce back against him that he's going to have to rebound later in the season. I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens are that team that kind of give him that real big problem to start off here. But I will say this, I'll take the Commanders to cover because 6.5 points is a lot of points, and I think that they keep it close, but the Ravens find a way to win in a tight moment there. Moving right along, Buccaneers at Saints. The Buccaneers are 3.5-point favorites, and I have to ride with that. Spencer Rattler's supposed to be starting for the Saints, and I'm just gonna not go with that. I'm gonna go with Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and whoever else is on that Buccaneers offense to figure it out and put up some points. The Saints have been trending a little bit backwards after their really hot red start to their offense, so I'm giving the Buccaneers. I think that they pull that off in the 1 o'clock slate. Another game I think Steelers fans are going to be paying a lot of attention to is the Browns at the Eagles. The Eagles this is huge. They are 9.5-point favorites. I have a hard time picking spreads that are that big, but I also have a hard time believing in the Browns right now. I think that they've been playing terrible football. The Eagles, could jump on that really quickly here. I will take the Eagles to win this game, but I will take the Browns to cover. That's just way too big of a margin for things that I have in there. But again, looking at the AFC North, you got two teams playing. I got the Ravens winning. I got the Eagles winning over the Browns. If the Browns lose, I believe that would make them 1-5 on the season. I think that's correct. They've had a really rough going, and I don't think the Eagles are a reprieve for them in Philly. Moving right along, AFC South matchup: the Titans host the Colts. The Titans are 2.5-point home favorites. But I'm going with the Colts. I think that they're going to be able to do some damage. I think that they're a team that I've seen obviously against the Steelers. I think that they'll be able to balance things, make things a little bit easier, and the Titans will be the team looking out of position in this game. We'll go to another game here, 1 o'clocker. Not one that I think that too many people might tune into because it's going to be a presumed blowout. But the Texans at the Patriots. The Texans are 7-point favorites. Give me that and the points. I don't care what you say. CJ Stroud's going to light these guys up. I think this Patriots defense needed some work, and I think the Texans are going to go to town there. All right, moving right along, still in the 1 o'clock games. Cardinals at Packers. The Packers are 5.5-point home favorites. The Cardinals coming off that big upset over the Niners. I'm riding with the Packers, though. I'm sorry. They are playing some good football. I think that they'll do it. I also think that they'll cover this. I think that 5.5 points is a fair spread, and they'll get ahead of it. But give me the Packers over the Cardinals at home at Lambeau Stadium. Let's go to the AFC West here. Chargers at Broncos. The Chargers are 2.5-point road favorites. But stop me if I'm crazy. I like the Broncos right now. The way they're playing, their defense is getting after it. Pat Surtain is a bad man. Bo Nix is figuring it out. I think the Chargers can certainly win this game, but I think that the Broncos have a slight advantage that could really work for them if they're able to get things going there. Let's move right along to the 4 o'clock games. Reminder: the Steelers' official kickoff time right now is 4:05 p.m. Those are always subject to change for other things going on. But let's talk about these other 4 o'clock games. This one seems like too much of a gimme layup for me. The Falcons at the Panthers. I'll take the Falcons even with your 6.5 points. The Falcons are winning that. Then we flip to Lions at Cowboys. This could be game of the week material right here because the Lions have been playing very well. The Cowboys are coming up, two big brands. I think that this is a close game, but like FanDuel has the Lions as 3-point favorites. Excuse me. I do think that the Lions deserve it. I think that they're playing better football right now. I think the Cowboys are coming off an emotional win on a technically a shorter week because of how late that game went. Give me the Lions. I think that they find a way to win this one. Then we move to Sunday Night Football, where I think Steelers fans will be happy to sit back. If the Steelers win, they'll be enjoying it. They'll keep the TV on, and they'll be flipping over to Channel 11 in Pittsburgh because it's time for Sunday Night Football. And with Sunday Night Football, you have the Bengals at the Giants. The Bengals are only 3.5-point favorites. That should worry me if I'm a Bengals fan, but I'm not, so I'm not worried. I am going to say, though, I do think that if the Giants beat the Bengals here, it is going to be red alert. And again, not that there hasn't been other red alerts that were obvious during the season, but man, Joe Burrow looked unstoppable last week against the Ravens, and they still lost. And to me, that's the problem right there, is that you need to be able to finish out games when you get a chance like that. And that was an emotional game. It was a home loss. Now you're on the road in New York. I'm taking the Bengals to win, but man, I would not be surprised if the Giants found a way to just breathe life into that situation. Then finishing off Monday night, Bills at Jets. Jets just fired Robert Saleh. I don't care what anybody says. The Bills are about to stomp those guys. That's going to be a rough one. When we come back, I'll give you my final keys to the game, what the Steelers need to do to beat the Raiders, and my final score prediction on the Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and that's because there's so many odds, ends, and lines. In fact, I just read you a whole bunch of them from the NFL for this week right here on FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, the Steelers lines, I'll give them to you here. The Steelers are 3-point road favorites against the Raiders. Their money line sits at -162, Raiders +136 with the over-under set at 36.5 points. And that money line shifted ever so slightly to the Raiders throughout the week, but you can get all those odds, ends, and lines at FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. And remember, FanDuel doesn't just do NFL. They do NBA, NHL, MLB, and WNBA. All the sports are active right now. This is the perfect time of the year to be placing bets. Get on FanDuel and start making your money today. And if you have never done that before, and this is a new time for you doing FanDuel, guess what? You make a $5 bet, FanDuel's going to give you $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 of free bets today for new customers when you bet just $5 only on FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here, getting you ready for Steelers-Raiders 4:05 kickoff in Las Vegas. The Steelers are on the road. They need to win this game to get back to having multiple games up on 500. And look, breaking down those games, I thought the Ravens are going to win. I think the Eagles are going to win. I think the Bengals are going to win. But, imagine if some of those go the other way, if the Commanders find a way to win and the Steelers can get back a game up on the Ravens that they've now forfeited after losing these last two games. That would be so big. I also think that if the Giants find some way to embarrass the Bengals, to further bury them and also the Browns, just getting that distance before all these AFC North games start getting played the second half of the season, that could be so huge, which is why a win like this, which I do think is a very winnable opponent that the Steelers have in front of them, they have to capitalize on it and they have to avoid the mistakes. Now, we'll get into the X factors there. Again, starting fast on offense is so huge. Get George Pickens involved early. That's a big one as well. But you cannot allow this Raiders team to get after you with Max Crosby. They need to help Roderick Jones. They need to help Dan Moore Jr. They cannot let the Raiders blitz get after Justin Fields and disrupt his timing. If that means extra blockers, it means extra blockers. If it means just telling your guys to block better, it means telling your guys to block better. But this Steelers offense needs to protect Justin Fields. They cannot allow the Raiders pass rush to get active, because look at how they rank right now. The Raiders are giving up the 27th most yards per attempt on the ground in the NFL. Granted, we just talked the last 2 weeks about how the Colts and the Cowboys were both two of the worst rushing defenses. But here's where I think it also gets interesting. The Raiders also are not doing well in defending the pass right now. They have some weaknesses there. If the Steelers can get going in the passing game to set up the running game against this team, that might be the perfect recipe. So, but to do all that before you get there, which is why I'm saying start fast with George Pickens, protect Justin Fields. You have to keep Crosby off him, and Mike Tomlin acknowledged the beast that he is there. You lucked out, and Christian Wilkins, the defensive tackle that they signed, isn't available for this game because he's on injured reserve. But I look at this, and I think that you get after the quarterback, you protect your quarterback, you start fast, you put yourself in a really good position to beat this Raiders team that I don't think has a ton of the star talent that can pull it over the top if they fall short there. So again, my main key: start fast with George Pickens, protect your quarterback there in Justin Fields, keep their pass rush, because again, if you keep the pass rush off of them, I think that Justin Fields will be able to attack this defense in so many different ways with the Steelers' weapons. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. And one last thing, Mike Tomlin, I guess this is another key here. Mike Tomlin mentioned explosive plays and how many explosive plays the Steelers gave up in their last game. They got to be the explosive play winners in this game. And that's why I think that shot plays, things like that, those are very important for what the Steelers need to do in this game to set the tone. So do they set that tone? Well, let's get into my final prediction here on Steelers at Raiders. I do think the Steelers set a tone early on. I don't think it lasts the entire first half, but I do think that there are some couple passes to George Pickens. You see it more deliberate. And I also think that the presence of the offensive line, being able to have the same starting offensive five on the offensive line for more than just one game, I think that can do wonders for you. Now, when I say wonders, I don't mean like they're about to become the number one rushing offense in the league or anything like that, but I am saying I do think that that the Steelers, they have options to try to get things done here, especially with this offensive line and getting points on the board. That's going to be so huge. I do think they score early. I'm not saying that they dominate the first half like they did against the Bengals last year when they went up 24-0 at halftime. But I do think that they get some early scoring in this game. I think some things click for them, and I think that things go in the right direction. I have the Steelers winning this one ahead of the spread, 27-14. That's where I have the game right there. I think that the Raiders get a couple big plays here and there, but ultimately the Steelers control this game and they get a win, getting back into the win column, advancing to 4-2, and looking forward with the rest of their schedule. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. A reminder, you can get all these shows on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content we thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. Back here Sunday night, breaking down the results of what happened Steelers Raiders. See you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.